Hello. Leonardo da Vinci is considered one of the greatest geniuses in history of painting. His skills and interest went far beyond just painting, which made him highly experimental. He built up his paintings very carefully, always striving for perfection. But creating his painting was also a very complex process. He applied many razor-thin layers on top of each other to achieve the subtle sfumato. However, his approach also took a massive amount of time. I painted this portrait of Lindell, inspired by his famous painting, Portrait La Belle Ferronnière. In this tutorial I will show you how I was able to build up this painting much faster using modern materials. The skin does have 6 glaze layers, but with modern solvent-free glazing mediums. A layer like this dries in 2 days and you can keep working quickly. Modern transparent pigments also make building up the layers much easier. But enough talking, let's look at the project from start to finish. The painting I used as a reference is La Belle Ferronnière, which you can admire at the Louvre in Paris. It is from Leonardo da Vinci's first Milanese period, and it's not yet as heavily characterized by the Sfumato technique as his very late works like the Mona Lisa. But personally, I actually prefer this more moderate Sfumato. My model Linda, whom nature has blessed with a beautiful Renaissance-style face, took the pose of La Belle Ferronnière and transported us straight to the 15th century with her gaze. Before I put the canvas on the easel, I study my subject by creating a charcoal drawing as a study. How can I distribute the values? Where do I simplify and perhaps idealize? And where do I need to watch out for mistakes with this specific subject? Many of the old masters did the same, as the numerous surviving sketches and drawings prove. Now let's move to the canvas. I'm painting on a classic fine linen portrait canvas. I did not prep or prime it any further. I am just sticking with the universal primer. It doesn't give me the smooth, highly optimized surface that Leonardo had, but it works and we don't want to overcomplicate things. After applying the imprimatura with burnt umber, I'm painting the background. So it is easier to judge the values of the subject in the Grisaille later. For the background I use an ivory black from Michael Harding. I'm already making sure to establish clean edges here. Now I build the volume of the subject with the Grisaille. I am skipping some of Leonardo's steps here and directly applying what would have corresponded to Leonardo's pink layer. It is called the pink layer because Leonardo liked to use vermillon in his grey mixture. In the first step I used dry brush technique and reinforced important parts of the underpainting. In the next step I develop the Grisaille with a mostly opaque layer. For this I use the paint straight from the tube without any mediums. I make sure to paint the Grisaille very smoothly. It is part of the painting and not just a sketch in oil. This way I can fully focus on the colors and sfumato during the glazing process later. We had the Christmas holidays and after more than 2 weeks the Grisaille is now completely dry and ready for the first glaze. Since we are following in Leonardo's footsteps, who according to technical analysis applied no less than 30 or 40 razor-thin layers, I am applying a few more glazes than usual in the subject. In total there are 14 glazing layers across the whole painting, with the skin areas receiving 6 layers. Just a quick note, at this point I would like to thank you for your attention. I'm currently preparing a video course that will cover the technique of Grisaille and glazing in great detail. The heritage of the old masters brought into the present day, with modern materials, without toxic thinners or lead paints. It will certainly take a few more months to complete, but I have set up an email list that you can join and I will notify when it's ready. Furthermore, I have noticed that many subscribers are not reached by YouTube. Therefore, I will also send you a short note when I have uploaded a new video here and what it is about. So, you will get not any spam or junk mail, I promise. You can find the link to the list down in the descriptions of every of my videos. Thank you. The first glaze on the hair is simply Michael Harding Red Umber. Technical analyses have shown that Leonardo used a great deal of manganese-rich umber which accelerates drying. The skin also gets the first glaze with earth colors, raw umber, raw sienna and a little madder red. For the first glaze layers I use Michael Harding Miracle Glazing Medium very carefully. I just dip the tip of the brush in the medium and create a very thin transparent mixture on the palette. Now I very carefully begin to work white paint into the fresh glaze. For this I'm using a lead white substitute. This technique allows me to avoid alternating between light and dark layers on a dry surface as Leonardo properly did. This way I can shorten the entire process. The sweater gets the first coat of glaze with a mix from alizarin red and ivory black. And this is what it looks like after the first glazing session. I neutralize the red umber from the first glaze on the hair somewhat with a glaze of raw sienna. After drying for 2 days, a second glaze is applied to the skin areas. In the shadows I use raw umber and in other areas I use mixtures of raw umber with raw sienna and a little scarlet lake. We know that Leonardo used his fingers to paint and blend, and this is sometimes a very effective technique. And again I work the white into the light areas. The second glaze on the skin is complete now. One more black glaze on the background. Soften the edges a little. And then another glaze for the sweater made of vermilion, red ochre and ivory black. The hair is given a little depth with raw umber and ivory black. Now comes the third glaze for the skin tones. I use different mixes for this, but mainly raw umber again. Raw sienna is mixed in for the light areas and a little ivory black for the deep, cool shadows. In a few places, such as the lips, I added a little madder red. Since this is a shadow glaze, I'm not using any white paint here. By adding shadows to certain details such as the eyes, eyebrows and nose, I increase the contrast slightly to make the intermediate tone values more harmonious. I also added some shadows to the sweater using red umber, green umber and ivory black. Previous glazes for skin tones consisted mainly of classic earth pigments. Now I'm switching to modern transparent pigments to achieve greater depth without having to paint 30 oily layers. To do this, I use a mixture of transparent oxide yellow, rose lake and ultramarine blue. To observe the fat over lean rule, I have now added some stand oil to the Michael Harding Miracle Glaze Medium. Again, white paint into the red glaze. The sweater gets another glaze with alizarin red, and in the shadows some ultramarine violet and ivory black. I also work in some white paint. Now intensify the hair color. I've prepared 4 glaze mixtures. For this I'm using ultramarine blue, madder red and Indian yellow. I mix shades ranging from deep violet to a yellowish brown. It's time to apply another glaze to the shadow areas of the skin. I have prepared 4 mixtures using modern transparent pigments. Transparent oxide yellow, scarlet red, madder red, ultramarine blue, and for the very dark edges some semi-transparent ivory black. Here I carefully add a little white to achieve the velature effect at this point. For the lips I added a little more red to the skin mix. Once again I apply a glaze to the skin, which is also extended over the shadow areas, as I want to use the Velantura technique in the shadows. The paints I use for this are transparent oxide yellow, rose red and ultramarine blue. I add a little more rose red to some areas of the face. Since I have already applied several layers, I make the medium a little more fat with stand oil. To check whether I have applied the glaze evenly and haven't missed any spots, I look at the painting from the side and use the reflections of the wet glaze. Again the white paint into the wet glaze. When using the Velantura technique, I'm very careful with the white paint. A little trick with the Velantura technique is to harmonize uneven areas once again with a little glaze mixture after applying the white. At this stage of the painting I'm working on some details again, such as the eyes and the lips. To do this I add ivory black or more red to the glaze mixture. In the last session for this painting, I'm concentrating on details and highlights. Since I'm not working in a wet glaze now, I do not use pure white for the highlights, but very light mixtures with transparent oxide yellow, rose red and ultramarine blue. The finished painting. I also corrected the shadow on the nose, which I had lost a little. Now the painting will dry for a while until I bring back the color and depth with the varnish. This painting will probably never end up in the Louvre in Paris, but I hope it serves its purpose and you can take something away from it for your own painting. In a YouTube video you can only hint at certain aspects, otherwise it gets too long and nobody watches. That is why I want to mention my upcoming video course again, where I will show and explain all aspects of this painting technique in detail over many hours. So I appreciate anyone who joins the email list and supports my work. With this in mind, keep painting and keep the true, the beautiful and the good. Bye bye.